All right, I had the privilege of getting to work with a group of second graders. For this lesson, I had a grade change, so I got bumped up to 6. So I was able to work with the second grade teacher in a coaching situation, and we were able to write our lesson. So we were looking at helping little kids to identify what is a bystander and what is an upstander. We've had some issues with bullying at our school and kids not feeling safe. So we wanted to do something to help empower them. And so we thought that by looking at literature and helping them analyze the problems of the characters and brainstorming some possible solutions, that would help empower the kids to stand up either for themselves or for their friends. And so we introduced the vocabulary of an upstander and a bystander, and all of the students knew what a bystander was. And then when I said, well, what do you think an upstander is? And second graders are so priceless because you stand up. Like, yeah, you do, but what does that mean if you stand up for someone or you stand up with someone? And they were like, well, we don't know. And I said, okay, well, let's read a couple stories. Let's see what we can find out. And so we were focusing for our writing standards, looking at having the students write opinion pieces in which they introduce the topic or book they were writing about, state their opinion, supply reasons that supported it, and then come up with a conclusion. So this was a little tricky for us because I wanted them to do it in a problem and solution format. So what would, in their opinion, what was a problem in the story, and then what did they think would be a possible solution for that? So we had a lot of fun. We started with the story Hooray for Wadney Wat, and I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with this story by Helen Lester, but she's so much fun. And in it, it's a story of a little Wat who has a speech impediment, and he's unable to say his R's. And so the students really enjoyed the book because they could relate a lot to Wadney because he was teased by the other Wodens. And they would ask him what to name for a bunny, and he would say a wabbit. And, so no one wanted to play with Wadney. And then all of a sudden, this new character is introduced into the book, and she's Camilla Capybara. And she is bigger than they are. And she walks in and just proudly says, I'm bigger than any of you, I'm meaner than any of you, and I'm smarter than any of you, so there. And I love these words because this is so second grade. She accidentally on purpose. And so if you know little kids around the age of 7 and 8, they do accidentally on purpose a lot. I didn't mean to step on his foot, but they do it. And so if they know they say it's an accident, then they know they're not going to get in as much trouble. So we went through the book, and it turns out at the end of the book, so no one's really an upstander in here, but in the end it turns out that Wadney kind of stood up for himself. And as he went through the story, he kind of, you notice he stands up a little straighter. You notice he talks a little louder. And so finally at the end, he's like the hero of the story because he got rid of Camilla Capybara. Because he told them all to go west. Well, they knew that meant to rest. But Camilla Capybara went west. And she was never seen from again. And Wadney was the hero of the story. So where I wanted the students to go was to look at one of the characters and kind of help them to be an upstander. What could you do to give advice to one of the characters in the book to help them? So where we went with this was we started out by making a chart. And this is just like we have kids edit and make a final version. This is our final version of our chart. Because when you're writing on a chart in class, it kind of ends up going like this because you're looking at them. So we brainstormed problems, and these are all kid words. The classmates teased Wadney for the way he talked. Camilla Capybara blurted out answers. She accidentally on purpose. She wasn't respectful. There was another problem, no one played with Wadney. And the students all joined in when someone was teasing with Wadney. So we started there. What were the problems? And then I said, okay, now turn and talk to your neighbor. Think about one problem that kind of stands out for you, and what are some solutions you could suggest to one of those characters that they could do that'll make a difference? And so they got their chance to talk to their partner, and then we shared out. And so tell them to stop, tell a teacher, ask Wadney to play a game. So then I just listed as we went through what were their solutions. And then that ended our lesson for day 1. And when I got to go back for my second lesson, we said, okay, we've made our problem solution chart. Now we're going to write a letter, and we're going to have our problem in our letter, and we're going to have our advice in our letter, and we're going to write a letter to someone to tell them how to solve their problem. So we wrote out kind of just a basic little, what are kind of the things you need to have in your letter, and then you need to make sure you explain the problem, you give them a solution, and then we said, well, who could we write to? Because the students tend to want you to give them each thing. They want the formula. They want the, I'm going to say, dear Rodney, and then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say that. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to write? I don't know. What do you want to say? What do you want to write? What do you want to share with that character? And so then we went through who could we write to, and then some possible things there. And then I told them, remember to use our chart. We need to use our problem and solution chart in your writing. Here's a resource for you, so go ahead and go back. Do you have to use these words? No. Do you need to use this kind of idea? Yes. I read a book about your problem. I would not like if you teased my voice like Wadney whacked. I think you should be a nice friend like me. Okay? So take a second, see what she can do, what she should be able to do. Did she talk about the problem? Did she talk about a solution? I had also told the kids it would be a really good idea if they could talk about an upstander and how they could be an upstander. So again, she wrote to Camilla. So Camilla was the bully in the story.
Because I'm close to your grade level, the fact her first sentence is important, that I read a book about your problem. She stated something that she knew and from a story that you read, so I think that that's impressive right off the bat.
Yes, I noted that as well, that she has an introduction here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is where I found my information. I read a book about your problem. This is how I know about it. So I thought that was very impressive that she did that.
Even if it might have been news to Camilla that she had a problem.
It definitely was news to Camilla that she had a problem. Right. Emily was a minimalist. Like when I looked at this, I was like, wow, there's not a lot of meat there. There's not a lot of background. There's not a lot of, just more. I wanted more. I don't think that 3 sentences is enough to kind of hit everything she needs to talk about.
Her solution to the problem in the last sentence is very general. I think maybe we'd want to move her in a more specific direction.
Right, like can you explain to me what a good friend is? Could you tell maybe Camilla just doesn't know and she needs that help to do that. I definitely...
Especially after you'd gone through problem solution and how to be specific to this problem, this solution.
And we did spend a lot of time. I think most of our time that we had spent was just on looking at that problem solution chart, because I wanted those kids to have those things just kind of like in their own little bag of tricks that they could use and that they could apply them, and trying to move them away from just tell a teacher.
Right.
And so we work a lot on what is the difference between being tattling and reporting. And so that we need to report to teachers things that are hurtful, mean, or scary. But the fact that you're borrowing my pencil and you forgot to ask, maybe I don't need to know that right now.
Right.
But so those need to be really clear for little guys, because they just think everything needs to be told to the teacher. So empowering them to take care of it by themselves. And so I think that writing a letter and saying, you could do this because this would happen. Okay. All right, so we have another one to look at. Now, this little guy and I sat one-on-one. They go in order in your packet. So this one's to Wadney. And we did a lot of talking as he was writing, because he did a great job of giving me lots and lots of things. But then when he would go to write it, it was just, I'm done. Okay, well, let's see. What did you want to say? What were you talking about? So he and I, we sat when there was 2 little boys, myself, and we just kind of walked through the writing together, talking a lot, not wanting them both to write the same thing, but wanting them to say, well, what would you do? Well, how would that go? What do you think? And getting them to kind of have that conversation as they wrote. Because little guys have a lot in their head, but it takes them so long to write it all down that they don't necessarily want to spend the time but if they can talk about it and they just said it, well, then they're kind of held accountable. Well, I just said that, I better write that. And it was more fun because it was just the three of us having a conversation.
I like the closing.
That was so cute because that was him, and he was like,
That's his voice. I
Yes,
like that.
yes, yes. And I like that he has a specific solution, you know, maybe we can play basketball, you know, we can be friends, we can play basketball together. So he took it that step further from just, you know, I can be your friend to something very specific. And I love that he has this really great sentence here.
Yes.
With the if clause.
Yeah.
And I'm
I was
very
there.
impressed by that. You know, if I was there, I would stand up for you. It's a great sentence for a second grader to write, I think.
so that was part of our conversation because as we were talking, I said, you know, well, what would you do if you were in the book? And so he was able to take that dialogue and then put it into his letter. So
Very
showing
impressive.
that writing conferences and coaching, you know, those kids with their
Yeah.
writing is really helps them to see, oh, I could do that. And then when they do.
In his first sentence, he stated the problem, and he also, you know, was able to embed his opinion, his empathy right there in one sentence. I'm sorry your friends made fun of you. You know? So there's the problem, and I feel bad about it already.
Right. He's a very sweet kid.
Very strong intro.
And even though he doesn't tell you what an upstander is, he does say,
Yeah.
I would stand up for you. So he's internalized it.
Right.
He's put it down, I would
Using it in
stand up.
his way.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so the last one that I have for us goes front and back. So here is, and colored. Dear Camilla, I read a book about your problem. I learned it is better to be an upstander than a bystander. An upstander is someone who stands up for you. A bystander is someone who stands by and lets you get bullied. I would not like it if you stepped, oops, I'm sorry, on my tail. I think that you're so big that when you walk, you don't know where you're going and step on rodents' tails. I think you should watch where you're going. I hope my advice helps. Okay, so I just wanted to bottle her and have, you know, all of that because I was just, so I'll give you a minute to go back over that. So when I read this letter and then looked at what my learning objectives were that I wanted to have, students will be able to identify upstanders and bystanders, identify the problems faced by the characters, analyze the problems and suggest possible solutions, write the problem solution letter to one of the characters. I was like, this is what I was looking for.
She does a really nice job with the definitions. And
I like that she offers solutions of things that the character can do, not just what I would
Yes.
do, but what can you do?
I really liked her empathy for Camilla here. You know, she didn't see Camilla as necessarily the the bad guy here, the villain of the piece, but she said, you know, I think you're so big that you just don't know what's happening.
It's not intentional. She did not see
Yes.
Camilla as malicious.
Exactly. So she shows this tremendous empathy. You know, is actually being an upstander herself for Camilla, and saying,
Right.
you know, maybe we just need to do things a little differently.
And her opinion is very clear.
she's giving Camilla benefit of the doubt. Maybe you don't realize.
And so where the middle lesson that we looked at was kind of a sit with teacher, one-on-one coaching. This was completely independent. We took the posters that we had made, we did what we had talked about, she went, she sat, she focused. So definitely different levels of ability all within one class, and definitely looking at where would we go next. And so I think that next it would be looking at maybe the story of Ruby Bridges, and so taking it to something that was a real life piece and getting the kids to be able to see that. I wish there were like Scholastic News for the littler guys that had stories, because there was one that fit for my 6th graders that they could take and use and have that be, you know, more informative versus the picture books that we were using. But I think Ruby Bridges is written at a level that the 2nd graders would get it, be able to do the same thing that we had done, but being able to look at the people in the community and what could some of them have done. So that is my next step, is finding those pieces that I could use with them to help them to see and make those connections. And then just as far as writing, I think I would ask this student if she was okay if I shared her writing with the class and then let the class talk about, well, what did she do? What was her writing like? Not only was it, because the first thing they'll say is, well, it was longer, so it was better. And so I look and I say, it's not always the length, but what did she say? So what did you guys notice about the words that she chose? Hopefully they would say, well, she talked about an upstander, she talked about a bystander. And, maybe we look at that first letter and then see that, wow, we didn't do any of that. And I think that happens a lot with students is they're like, well, I didn't do that. But they have to see it first. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to do a completely teacher-modeled letter where I wrote it all out, because then what I knew I was going to get was exactly what I had written.
Right.
And I really wanted to see what could they do. But then I think by showing a student sample letter, they could see that. And then if we applied the same concept maybe to the Ruby Bridges story, then that would give them the opportunity to kind of up-level their writing to meet the criteria.